Hey everybody, are you ready for some fun crochet stuff? Today we're going to crochet this little flower, and this is my Josephine flower. This is the flower that decorates my Josephine cloche, which is a free pattern that includes the flower pattern on my blog. If you prefer having a PDF pattern that gives you a good look at stitch charts as well as a little bit more information, you can either purchase my Josephine flower pattern on my Ravelry shop, or you can purchase the Josephine cloche pattern on my Ravelry shop, which will give you the pattern for the hat as well as the flower. So let's get started. The first thing about the pattern is it's 3 flowers that go together in a stacked grouping. So let's move that guy out of the way. And we start out, this is flower 1, flower 2, and flower 3. And then once they're all completed, you have, of course, all these fun little tails running around. You weave in the center tails, and I tend to leave the tails once I've woven them in towards the center of the flowers so that I can use the tails to sew the flowers together. In the case of this flower, I brought the tails from the last flower forward and sewed around the center of the first flower to give it more of a defined center for the very top of the flower. It also brings this background color to the foreground. So let's start with flower number 1. And all of these flowers start with an adjustable slip knot. If you've never experienced adjustable slip knot, I'm going to show it to you here today, but if you have trouble understanding it, I also have a video on my YouTube channel. Oh, by the way, this is Andee Graves at Longmont Yarn Shop. Hello. It's like, so the way I do an adjustable slip knot is I want, when I pull on the starting tail, to tighten the first chain. So I make a circle and then pop the end through, place it on my hook. This is always a little weird doing this because I have the camera kind of in my way while I'm working. There we go. And now I've snuggled it up onto the hook. So when I make my first chain, this first chain is going to become the center of my flower. So I'm going to chain 1. This is going to be my turning chain or step up chain. And this chain 1, instead of leaving it its normal size that would be coming off my hook, I'm going to squish it a little bit. The reason I'm going to do that is I'm ending this group of stitches, which is going to be 5 single crochets into the first chain. And I just go under one leg of the chain, because as you can see, it starts to open up as I make the stitches. So I can do a multitude of stitches in that first chain and not have to stretch it too much. Okay, now let me make sure I've got the right number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm done. I'm going to, let's see if you can see how this is stretched out. I have this big open spot that I can now close. So I'm going to close it by pulling gently on my beginning tail, and now it's closed nice and tight. I'm going to come back to the first single crochet I made, and it's sometimes a little tricky to get in there, so you have to hold your mouth just right to get your hook in there. And I'm going to pull through, and then I'm going to tighten that slip knot or slip stitch as tight as I can, so there's just a little knot. Now I'm going to chain 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to make a cluster stitch in the same stitch where I joined, which is always a little tricky to see. Come up, yarn over, go in. That makes my first cluster stitch. Then on top of this cluster stitch is going to be a picot. So I'm going to chain 3. And the way I anchor my picot to make it really perky and make it sit nice and snug on top is I go under the first loop or front loop of my stitch, the cluster stitch, and then I'm going under the 2 side loops. Bring my yarn over, pull through the loop on my hook, and tighten that nice and snug. I'll chain 3 again, and I'm finally ready to move on to my next stitch, which is right here. And I'm going to go in, oops, and pull through, tighten it up, chain 3, and I'm going to repeat everything I did in the first group. And I'm running out of yarn here, so let me show you what happens. We're now, this little guy, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 petals. And now when you get to the end, it starts to look a little strange, but you go into this last stitch. Ooh, there we go. Make a slip stitch, chain 3, do a 2 double crochet cluster, make our picot, chain 3. Now the trick with this last little bit is where you connect. Now you can see the slip stitch that ended round 1. You're going to kind of just work your hook underneath that slip stitch, pull through, and tighten that all up. And I obviously had fastened off before. Now the nice thing about this little flower, it only takes 3 yards of worsted weight yarn using an H hook, and it's 2 inches from point to point across the center here. So now he's done. Our next flower is flower number 2. I have really exciting names for these on my pattern. But flower number 2 has 4 rounds, and I'm going to shift things so I can see my pattern a little better. Okay, so, and just so you know, that picot and the strange way I do it on top of the cluster stitch, that is illustrated on my blog as well as in the pattern. There's a photo tutorial to help you with that. So you can see this guy has these open spaces here. And the big thing about why I have the tiny guy is because when this is put over the top of this, it hides those holes. And that was the whole reason I ended up making this 3. Now, if you wanted, you could just make 2, and this makes a very nice little flower. I just like to get fancy with the frilly flower on the back. And the frilly flower on the back, if you want to do it in green, you can make it be a leaf instead of a flower petals. So let's show you number 2. Let's see. I confused myself because I made number 2 demo things in white. Okay, so for starting out number 2, we're going to start out the same way we started with number 1. We did a chain 2, and we did 10 single crochets into the center, and then tightened it up. And then, what did I do here? I lost one of my pieces. Hold on a second here. Oh, where'd it go? All right, well, let me grab a ball of yarn. Hang on. I think we're just going to pull this out. Sorry, guys. When I was doing my step outs, I forgot about part, but this goes pretty quick. So, and the nice thing about crochet that I've always loved is it's easy to pull out. So, to start round 2 in flower number 2, after you've made your little circle of single crochets, you're going to chain 1, and you, again, I squish that chain 1 a little bit, and then I'm going to do a single crochet in that first stitch, chain 3.
You do have a question when you're at a stopping point.
Okay. Where's the question?
Could you use the magic ring instead of the chain to start?
Yes, in fact, it is in my instructions. If you use a magic ring, you're going to only chain 1 at the start instead of the chain 2. That's the only difference it's really going to make. But that is in the pattern. It's noted on the blog as well as on the pattern that's available for purchase. So then we're going to skip a stitch and we're going to make a single crochet. We're going to chain 1 and we're going to go to the next stitch. Sorry, we didn't skip a stitch, we just went to the next stitch with that after that chain 3. And then we do a single crochet, chain 3, go to the next stitch, do a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet in the next stitch. So you're going to single crochet in every stitch going around, but you're going to alternate chain 3s and chain 1s between the stitches. And all of these flowers are meant to be slightly ruffled and cupping so they don't lay flat. If you want them to lay flat, you're going to need the center to be a little bit more open. All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, chain 1, go into this stitch. And this is always where I go, wait a minute, that's not going to work because I'm going to chain 3, but it actually does. I chain 3, I do a single crochet in the last stitch, then I chain 1 and slip stitch to the first single crochet. So when you get to the end and it's looking a little odd to you, you're okay. All right, so then we're going to show you how to start round 3. Again, chain 1, squish the chain a little bit. By the way, that squish chain happens because when you join with the slip stitch, if your chain is its full height, you will get a much more noticeable join as you go through the layers of your flower. So if you can squish your chain a little bit at the beginning, even though it makes it a little trickier to work into that first single crochet. Now sometimes, because when this is all one color, it's a little harder to spot, I will put a stitch marker in my first single crochet when I start to get into these bigger rounds, just to make it easier to spot where I'm ending. My next stitch is going to be a half double. Then I'm going to do a double. And for those of you that have never met this is the extended double crochet. So you yarn over like normal, go into the chain space, bring up a loop, yarn over, go through 1 loop. You're making a chain. Then yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through the final 2 loops on your hook. And that's an extended double crochet. It's the same height as a treble crochet, but the feet of the stitch are smaller, so when you have multiple stitches going into a space, it doesn't take up quite as much room. Again, another extended double crochet, and a 3rd extended double crochet, and a double, a half double, and a single. And can we see that? Kind of got this a little bright. There we go. All right. So now we have 9 stitches that we just put into that chain 3 space. We're going to skip the chain 1 and the 2 single crochets, and we're going to go to the next chain 3 space. And we're going to repeat those 9 stitches, doing a single, half, double, and 3 extended doubles. And I'm going to run out of yarn about now. So we're just going to repeat that in each of the chain 3 spaces around on the flower. And when we get to the end of round 3, we have this nice little petaled flower starting to happen here. Get this guy ready to go. So we're at the end of round 3, and let's move my stitch marker so you can kind of see what's happening here. Now one trick I have is if I can't spot my first stitch, I will go back to where I can see the stitch tops clearly and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ta-da! Because sometimes that first little chain one can fool ya. So I've worked the 5th petal of round 3, and I'm now going to slip stitch into that first stitch. Let's see if we can see this. I'm at an awkward angle here. Now I'm going to pull that up nice and tight, get my stitch marker out of the way, and now I'm ready to make the final and decorative round for flower number 2. So I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to count, and remember where I slip stitch is 1 stitch. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do a single crochet. I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to do a single crochet in the next stitch, and then I'm going to single crochet in the next one, and I'm going to do a picot into that single crochet. So again, we're chaining 3. Now in this case, it's just a single crochet, so we're going under the front loop and under the side loop, yarning over, pulling through, completing this slip stitch, and you got a little perky picot there. And I'm going to do one more single crochet in that same stitch. So I've done a single crochet, picot, single crochet, all in that one stitch. Then I'm going to do a single crochet in the next stitch, chain 2, single crochet in the next stitch. Now this is where it gets interesting. I'm going to chain 2, but I don't really have a stitch to work into. Instead, I'm going to kind of squish this a little bit with my finger so I can really see between these 2 single crochets. This is a single crochet in this chain 3 space and a single crochet in this chain 3 space. And I'm going to insert my hook in that space under those 2. And I'm going to make a nice snug slip stitch. Then I'm going to chain 2. And this is where I always mess myself up because I can't spot that guy. If you can see, once I've done that slip stitch in there, this first stitch of this group on this petal kind of gets invisible, but you have to remember he's there. So count him as 1, 2, and then this is where we're going to make our next single crochet. Chain 2, single crochet. Now, of course, those of you who have ever taken a class with me know I always have lots of tricks up my sleeve. And I'm lazy. I don't want to have to think about it all the time and count all the time. So actually, when I'm making a bunch of these flowers, what I will do is count after I do round 3 and put a stitch marker in the 5th stitch, which is the top one, on each of these petals. So I know that where the stitch marker is where I'm going to do my single crochet, picot, single crochet. So if I end up with too few or 2 stitches, I know I have skipped a stitch down here, which is very easy to do when you've joined underneath here. Okay, so let's see, where were we at? We have a single crochet, and in this one we're going to single crochet, picot. And we keep doing this until we get all the way around, and it gives us our nice, pretty petal. And I'm going to move him out of the way. And this is our last little bit. This is what he's going to look like now. He's got these nice things. Now, I have taken the iron to these guys before when I want them to lay a little flatter or just look a little smoother. But I also kind of like the way they look just straight off the hook. I'm going to insert here. So I have done 2 single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. This is my final chain 2 at the end of round 4. Where do I attach? Whoops, sorry. Giving you guys a little seasickness here. All right. So again, we're looking for where that original slip stitch was, And we're going to kind of squish this around a little bit and go down in between the two single crochets like we've done before. Pull that up, and voila! Flower number 2 is done. All right, now flower number 3. He gets lots of picots. Starts out with the adjustable slip knot, or for those of you that prefer the magic loop or magic circle, you can do that. We chain 1. Now the beginning center part of this flower is a little larger. Let's see. Come here, guy. If you look at the completed flower, I'm sorry, tails are kind of in the way here. He's got all these picots here, and he's got really big holes. Again, this is a more open center because it's going to be covered by the layers of the other flowers. And by having this more open, it also makes this flower larger without having more than 4 rounds. So I kind of made that choice as a designer for expediency. I like to be able to work these guys up fast, and 4 rounds is sort of like the super quick. You can still do a lot of interesting things with the design. Okay, so to begin round 2 of flower 3, which flower 3 starts just like flower 2 with 10 single crochets into the center here. We're going to go into the first stitch. We're going to do a single crochet. Oh, and we did I do my chain 1? Hold on here. Yep, I got my chain 1, and he's been shrunk. Or I like to say I squish him. And go in, do a single crochet, chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Go back into the same stitch and make a single crochet. Chain 1, skip 1 single crochet on your center. Go to the next single crochet, single crochet, chain 5. Go back into the same stitch. And chain 1, skip 1, work in the next stitch, single crochet. So we're just doing this all the way around. Come back into here. And we're going to continue like that. And we end up with this little guy. We're on the last one. Whoops. A little tail will get in the way. Out of the way here. So we've done 5 loops of 5 chain 5 loops. There we go. And we've done the second single crochet. Now we're going to chain 1. And I usually give this a tug so I can see exactly where I need to work here. And I'm going to work into this stitch. I've made my chain 1, and I'm going to slip stitch snugly in there. And now I'm ready to start round 3. We're going to start very similar to how we did in flower 2. Do a chain, squish him down a little, do a single crochet into the chain 5 space, and then we're going to get a little different. We have a half, and we have 2 doubles. Then we're going to do an extended double, chain 1, extended double, and just repeat what we did going up to the top. 2 doubles, a half double, and a single. We've made the first petal of flower number 3. I'm just going to hop on over to, I have to double check myself here. Yes, do as single, half double, and we're just going to continue repeating these stitches, and I have to count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 11 stitches that we've worked into each petal if we count the chain 1 space. Once we get to the end of round number 3, and get this all unhooked here. We're ready to join to the first stitch. And again, if you're having trouble spotting that first stitch, you just count backwards from where it's obvious that you have 2 stitches here. We say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And you can see in this one, even though I've squished this chain, it still looks pretty big, so it's very easy to mistake it for the stitch. I'm going to go into my single crochet, make a snug slip stitch, and now we're ready for the little decorative edging. We're going to start like we did in flower 2. We're going to chain 2. We're going to count 2 stitches, counting the one we're in. 1, 2, go to the 3rd stitch, make a single crochet, chain 2. Now we're getting a little different. We're going to skip this next stitch and go to the first extended double crochet, make a single crochet. We're going to put a picot in that single crochet. We're going to do another single crochet in that same stitch. We're going to do a single crochet in the chain 1 space with a picot. And we're going to do a single crochet here. Single crochet. Chain 3, picot, single crochet, oops, and I just split my yarn, hold on, there we go. I'm going to do a single crochet, chain 3, chain 2 now, skip this stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, chain 2, and again, we're going to push those aside so we can find that space. Go in here and do our slip stitch. And then we're just going to keep repeating that until we get our finished flower. And we're going to join with that last slip stitch is again going to join into that space between the 2 single crochets. Now, once we have our 3 flowers, they need to be joined together. And the question is, did I bring my little darning needle? I don't know about you all, but my little darning needles tend to like to disappear. All right, let's see if I got the little one with me today. And I do. Yay! It's always happy when you have the thing you want, right?
Oh yeah.
How are we doing on time, Christianna?
It is 11:01.
Okay. It's like, so. I'm just going to show you, we're getting close on time here. We got a little late start though, so. Pop this through here. When I weave in, I want to pull my center tail really snug. Get you guys out of the way. And then I'm going to weave in the tail from the back around the base of the round 1 stitches. This does 2 things. It tightens it up so it doesn't come undone, and it also can add a little padding to the center of your little flower, which is kind of nice. So I've got that done. Now I could just cut this and just use the final tail to weave in, but I tend to just leave my tails because, you know, when you're making an embellishment piece like a flower or something of that nature, I tend to cut the tails at the last because I'm not always sure where I am going to want them. Now, I ended this with a slip stitch, and that looks fine because it's blending in pretty well with this yarn. If you find that that little knot at the end bothers you, you can use an invisible join. And I believe we actually had a Facebook Live about that at one point here at the shop. I also have a demo about it on my blog. You just search invisible join. But now I've got both tails woven in, and they're ready to join to this flower, but I want to weave this flower's tails in first. So if you guys can see here, I've got a little bit of an opening in my round one for this flower, and since I'm going to cover that center, that's fine. I forgot to bring buttons today because one of the fun things you can do for the center of flowers is use a pretty button or something to make the center extra sparkly. So you could even do this with a button in the middle here, and it's really nice. Now, I have made many of these flowers just with these two levels. To me, it kind of looks like a daffodil. Actually, you want to really make it look like a daffodil? Here we go. Ta-da! It's a daffodil. I'm ready for daffodils. I don't know about the rest of you, but I am really ready for spring. It's like, but so if you can do it in the same color, I like the contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up here. Let's see, weave this a few times. And I like these bent needle tapestry needles or yarn needles, whatever you want to call them, because they're really nice to get into tight little stitches. And I believe we have these here at the shop. This is the Clover Chibis, and they're really nice. They come in a set of 3 different sizes of needles. All right, that guy's out of the way. Let's take care of our ending tail here. And sometimes with this flower with the 3 layers, it's easier to sew flower 1 to flower 2 before you sew to flower 3. So let's see, get on the right side here, or the wrong side as it is. Pull through. One thing you want to be careful when you're weaving tails like this with a piece that's got a lot of open work is not to pull too hard when you bring the tail through. You just want it snug enough that it's going to stay put. And then I tend to weave back up. I don't like my tails to come out, so I'm kind of a little fussy. I weave in 2 directions, especially if I'm going to use this flower to be like a brooch, which I can sew a pin back onto this once I get them all constructed. If it's going to be a brooch, having the tails to sew at the end is really helpful. Or you can weave them in more like you would do on a normal crochet project. So now the trick is, when I start joining them together, is to make sure that they're oriented the way I want them, so that this little flower is covering up the holes on the bigger flower. Unless you like the holes, and then hey, go for it. I mean, for me, and maybe this is because I'm a designer, but a pattern is just a suggestion to get you started. Okay, I'm secure. And I try to kind of sew around the center of the flower, just so the petals will stay perky and loose. Now, if I wanted to, because I've got contrasting color here, I can use the yellow tails to sew back up through the pink flower to hold it in place. And I kind of like to do that sometimes just because it also secures the flower a little better. And I left longer tails. I'm going to use my longest tail. Let's see. I keep getting out of camera. Sorry about that, guys. And let's see. So I go up through the middle and up into the flower. And go back down. And then I come up the next spot. Oops, sorry. Coming around. And I just continue around. So I have a little outline. And the center, whoops, I'm almost losing my yarn. And come back down. And let's see there. Oops, and I did it. And sometimes you start to run out of yarn. So when that happens, I'm just going to go back down. Fortunately, I have a second tail of yellow in there. So if you're going to do something like this where you sew around the center, you might remember when you cut your tails for your number 2 flower that you maybe leave your little extra tail so that you've got a little bit more room for sewing. Let's see, you got to go all the way over here. Whoops. And that guy's sewn. And there we are. There's one little flower with 2 layers. And then I would do the same thing to join here, but I like to stagger it so that the petals of flower 3 are kind of in between the petals of flower 2. If you do it this way, you still get a really pretty look. But it's just up to your own preference how you like it. And that is the Josephine flower. Thank you everybody for joining me here today. If you have any questions, we'll be checking them online. And please come by and see us in the shop soon.